everybody. Welcome back into another edition Prime Sports World. I'm coming to you, bringing you the Jacksonville Jaguars season preview, as they were one of the surprising teams in the NFL in 2022. We're going to talk about what they're going to look like in 2023. Of course, your host, David On Point Huppin, and we are now just 40 minutes away from the start of the NBA draft. Keep an eye out for our winners and losers to content tomorrow. So keep an eye out for that content. Stay with us here at Prime Sports World. We give you live content every single day, including yesterday. We gave you our most recent mock draft. If you want to go back and watch that content. But on today's show, we're going to talk about the Jacksonville Jaguars, talk about what they're going to look like in 2023. CEO Israel Rivera should be joining me here momentarily with the show. Please like, share, and subscribe to the podcast if you enjoy what we do here at Prime Sports World. We also have a plethora of streaming platforms. So if you do happen to miss us live, you can catch us over there. All of our episodes are over there as well. And then we are also on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. So thank you very much for checking us out here at Jacksonville Jaguars 2023 season preview. Let's get into it. Let's talk about Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence MVP conversation. TJ Hopkins, who's busy tonight, couldn't make it on camera for this particular show. But he talked about Trevor Lawrence being potentially an MVP candidate. And I'm here to question. I think he could be an MVP candidate. Last season, 4,113 yards, 25 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. But those numbers are a little bit misleading because towards the back half of the season, he was really good. Like he was 2 interceptions in his final 8 games. I mean, it's like 10 games to go with. So really, he turned it on as the season got. I mean, he started out kind of rocky with 6 of those 8 interceptions came in the first 9 games of the season, then only threw 2 more for the rest of the season. That's pretty good value out of your quarterback. The other thing that's great about Trevor Lawrence and his quote-unquote MVP stand opportunity, he plays in a division that's not all that good, or we don't expect him to be all that good. We have the Tennessee Titans, who are a little bit of a transition, don't really know exactly what they're going to be like this season, especially next season for sure. We don't even know who the starting quarterback is going to be for that team. And then we got the Houston Texans, we got the Indianapolis Colts. Those teams that could be all over the place, and we don't really know exactly what they're going to be when it comes to this particular season. They could not be all that good. And if you watched our prediction episode, we didn't predict them to be all that good. So there's a real opportunity here for Jacksonville Jaguars, Trevor Lawrence, to be in the MVP conversation. And I don't think it's that ridiculous to think that he could be the legit MVP when the season's over this year. Moving over for the second topic, we got year number 2 under Doug Peterson. I've also shared the StreamYard link into all of the chat places. So if you want to join me and talk about the Jacksonville Jaguars, more than welcome to do so. Bail me out here a little bit so I don't have to do this show completely by myself. I will greatly appreciate it if somebody can help hang out with me and talk a little bit of Jacksonville Jaguar football before the NBA draft gets started here in just about 35 minutes. So looking forward to that. But yeah, Jacksonville Jaguars under Doug Peterson really turned this team around. Went from, basically had the number 1 overall pick the season before into being a playoff team in just a span of 1 season. They were top 10 in terms of offensive yards gained this season at 374 yards. This is a team that really played really well this entire season, and they were pretty balanced. Rushing yards, 2,000 rushing yards, 3,900 passing yards, a good balanced attack. When you look at their defense, it leaves much to be desired. In the bottom 10 in defense, giving up 353 yards. Also, they're middle of the pack when it comes to points allowed. So that's actually pretty solid. But yeah, they still have some stuff that you'd like to shore up when it comes to Jacksonville Jaguars. But I expect this team to just be better than they were the season before. I expect them, Trevor Lawrence to improve. I expect this defense to get a little bit better. Devin Lloyd going into his second season. Trayvon Walker going into his second season. Rayshon Jenkins was really good for them last year. Tyson Campbell, I think this is his 3rd season now. The other Josh Allen continues to be a force there at the edge rushing position as they play a 3-4 there in Jacksonville. I think one of the issues could be this offensive line. Juwan Taylor left in free agency. He's now a member of the Kansas City Chiefs. He kind of replaced him with Walker Little. who was a good draft pick a few years ago, but hasn't really played out. Brandon Sheriff's a good football player. Cam Robinson's going to be suspended for the first 6 games of the season, or I think maybe 4 games. I don't remember exactly. I can't remember what he did. It might be PEDs, but I just expect this Jacksonville Jaguars team, especially under Doug Peterson, to get more dynamic on offense. I expect them to be more. I see more gadget plays, more stuff to just do in offense when it comes to Jacksonville Jaguars, and that's kind of what I expect out. I expect them to be even better than they were the season before, and they were pretty darn good last season, if you remember. Obviously, a playoff team. Obviously, won the AFC South. Obviously, beat the Los Angeles Chargers in that game when they were down by a considerable amount. 11-6 is probably what we're talking about here. Like 9-8 last year as a playoff team, beat the Chargers to make the playoffs. So like to see that. I'd expect them to just take another step under year 2 under Doug Peterson and continue to play extremely good football. To the final storyline, let's talk about Calvin Ridley, as they traded for Calvin Ridley at the trade deadline last season. Really didn't give up much to get him. I think it was just like a 5th-round pick and some stuff. But let's not forget, Calvin Ridley, before the season where he basically got shut down due to mental health issues, and then the season where he got suspended. I mean, he was a 1,300-yard receiver for the Atlanta Falcons with 9 touchdowns, 90 catches, and he was on an upward trajectory to becoming one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. That was slightly derailed with mental health problems and the gambling thing. But I just, when you look at this Jacksonville Jaguars team, you have Christian Kirk, you have Zay Jones, you have Evan Ingram. I mean, you have Jamal Agnew still on this team, who's a good return guy, but it just gives you some elements in the passing game that you can still use in bubble screens and stuff like that. But Calvin Ridley gives you a legitimate number 1 wide receiver. Christian Kirk is your number 1. Calvin Ridley for sure can. He was basically the guy, the heir apparent to Julio Jones there in Atlanta. I think Calvin Ridley is really going to transform this offense. I think he's going to be one of those pieces that you look back at when the Jacksonville Jaguars would be like, man, this trade was one of the reasons that this team was really good this season. I mean, he seems to have a good head on his shoulders. He seems to have recovered from the mental health stuff that he was dealing with. What was it, 2 years ago? Yeah, 2 years ago. So hopefully he's continued on that trajectory. Continue to get your mind right. Continue to not gamble on sports as a professional athlete, as that seems to get you in trouble. But Calvin Ridley is going to be do numbers for this offense. You're adding a wide receiver that put up 1,300 yards in his 3rd season and 9 touchdowns, and you're adding that to an offense that was already dynamic and explosive with a quarterback that's as good as it gets in the National Football League and throwing the deep ball. I think the sky is the limit when it comes to Calvin Ridley and the Trevor Lawrence combination. You just got to love that. I mean, he had a 15-yard average per catch. You're adding that to an offense that's already explosive. Kudos to Jacksonville Jaguars. I think I loved that trade when they made it. I didn't really understand the Atlanta Falcons side of it. But moving on from there, let's talk about the NFL draft. As they had 1 billion picks in this year's draft. Could talk about most of them. In the first round, they got Antoine Harrison, the offensive tackle out of Oklahoma. Obviously, Cam Robinson suspended. It could be 2, 4, 6 games for LA substance abuse policy. Walker Little probably plays left tackle, but this guy's going to be a swing tackle. He's a good football player. Played a lot of snaps there at Oklahoma. And he's crucial that he plays well. He's probably going to be the starting right tackle while Cam Robinson's suspended. If he doesn't do the job over entirely. He played a lot of snaps at Oklahoma. He played at left tackle. He played at right tackle against Kent State. He's just versatile enough to play right tackle, guard. He can play pretty much anywhere when it comes to the offensive line for the Jacksonville Jaguars. And then they took Brenton Strange, tied him out of Penn State in the 2nd round. This is a pick they made for the Jacksonville Jaguar or for the Chicago Bears. They only have 3 tight ends, so they needed to get another one. Evan Ingram on a franchise tag. This guy caught 70 passes, 755 yards, 11 touchdowns in his 4 years at Penn State. He's really more of a blocking tight end than he is necessarily a catching tight end. But yeah, he did run a lot of wide out. You could even run him a wide receiver. So we'll see what ends up happening. Pretty could be a sneaky steal there. And then Tank Bigsby, running back out of Auburn. 4.56 in the 40. This guy is just a big bodied running back who should give you some depth there at the running back position, with Travis Etienne and Dearest Johnson being the only guy that are really there when it comes to Tank Bigsby. Ventrell Miller, depth at the inside linebacker position. Was a productive tackle, 86 in 2022, 74 in 2022. Did have 7.5 sacks and 2 forced fumbles in his 5-year career while at the University of Florida. Tyler Lacey, wasn't much of a pass pleasure his time in Oklahoma State, 11 sacks in 4 seasons. But he is a good running back, and he is a good backup to their edge rushers there in Jacksonville as they look to shore up that defense, which was a bit of a question mark going into it. Antonio Johnson, the safety out of Texas A&M. He's listed as safety, but he played 45% of his snaps left of his slot at the Aggies at the cornerback position, who ranked first in pass defense in the SEC. This is the guy that Izzy, if he was on the show, was really high on going into the draft, getting him in the 5th round, pick from the New York Giants. Pretty good value there. Parker Jackson, another wide receiver out of Penn State, 146 catches, 192 yards, 12 touchdowns in 3 seasons there at Penn State. Just gives you some depth there at the wide receiver position. Christian Barswell, quarterback out of Rutgers. He spent 6 years in college at Temples, and Rutgers spent his time there. He did miss some time due to a knee injury, but he finished the strong with 3 interceptions, 11 pass breakups his 1 season at Rutgers. He probably have a special teams role. In round 6, they picked another safety. This kid out of Penn State, playmaker, 158 tackles, 22 pass breakups, 4 forced fumbles, 5 fumble recoveries, and 7 interceptions in his 4 seasons there at Pitt. They took another offensive tackle, Cooper Hodges, out of Appalachian State. Started 51 games, mainly at right tackle, but he could play guard in the National Football League. He actually did that in the Collegiate Bowl. And then they took a defensive tackle out of North Carolina, and then they took a fullback out of Houston. Not a lot to talk about with those last 2 picks when it comes to the Jacksonville Jaguars, as those are kind of just depth picks, especially the defensive tackle. A little undersized to play defensive tackle. It's 6'2", 300 pounds. Has probably a long shot to even make the roster. 96 tackles and 5.5 sacks in 4 seasons at Tar Heels. This is just if he does make the roster, good for him. And I don't really understand the fullback selection. But I mean, it's really all this pick is really going to come down to is Antoine Harrison. I mean, he's got to be the heir apparent to Cam Robinson. He's got to be good enough to be right guard, left guard, somewhere in that offensive line. Let's see, they have him currently listed on their depth chart. So they currently have him as the backup to Cam Robinson, who's obviously suspended. So he'll probably start at left tackle when the season gets started. This is an okay draft. We'll see what ends up happening. Antoine Harrison, I mean, they didn't have a lot of value picks. Like they had only the 1, 2, 3. Then they had 2 4th-round picks and then 5. And then they had a lot of picks in the 5th and 6th round. Don't always get good players out of there when you draft them that early. Azir Abdullah, the kid out of Louisville, is super athletic. Well, he's a little undersized, but 42 tackles for loss while he was at Louisville. Yazir Abdullah, he'll probably play in some sub packages, filling in for former 1st-round pick Kayvon Kason, who has his last 2 seasons. So we'll see what ends up happening with that. Moving on from there, let's talk about free agency and roster shakeup. Most of the time, this is an unfortunate scenario where they basically lost way more players than they gained. They did add offensive tackle Josh Wells, who can play guard or left tackle or right tackle. He's a really good swing tackle. And with Cam Robinson missing that time, he's a valuable player. Who is coming off a torn PCL tear in December. So who knows when he's actually going to be available. With a 4 to 6 month time period, that's a really devastating injury for any football player, but maybe a defensive tackle, even offensive tackle, even more. They got Chandler Brewer, another offensive tackle, added to this roster as well. They added Dearest Johnson, who was a really good running back for the Cleveland Browns. They just had a bunch of those guys. So he signs a 1-year deal with the Jacksonville Jaguars. They signed Josh Wells. They brought in Brandon McManus, who was an excellent kicker. I don't remember who their kicker was last season, but Brandon McManus was immediately an upgrade over whoever they had last year. I honestly cannot remember. But when we talk about this team, this really talks about all the departures. Juwan Taylor, but they're left. Their starting right tackle, leaves to go to Kansas City to replace Orlando Brown Jr. Artie Key, edge rusher, ends up going to the rival in Tennessee. Shaquille Griffin. I cannot remember where Shaquille Griffin ended up. Marvin Jones Jr. is a solid running wide receiver for the Jacksonville Jaguars. He's no longer on this team. And Dan Arnold, tight end, no longer on this team. I did trade for during the season last year, who there was some hype for. And welcome into the show, CEO.
What's up, my boy?
We were breaking down their free agency roster shakeup. As you look at the names on the list here, what's your reaction? And I'll get you real quick before we move into that. Let's just get your quick sense on their storylines. Trevor Lawrence MVP conversation, yes or no? We'll be in that conversation, yes or no?
Absolutely, he's going to be in that conversation. I think Trevor Lawrence improved tremendously. He probably improved to being a top 10 quarterback last year. So I think Trevor Lawrence is definitely going to be in the MVP consideration. I have to give an apology because I literally thought that he was going to be a bust after that first year. So
year two,
Trevor Lawrence.
Year 2 under Doug Peterson. What's your expectations for this football team?
Win the AFC South. I mean, you guys are favorites right now, so win the AFC South and win a playoff game. That's the expectations, in my opinion. I think when you win a playoff game, if you get to the AFC Championship game, I think you're ahead of schedule.
How do you expect Calvin Ridley to transform this offense as they traded for him at the trade deadline last year? Obviously, he's been dealing with some mental health and some suspension things. Just what are your expectations for Calvin Ridley? What do you think he's going to do with this offense?
I think Calvin Ridley's going to make this offense just a little bit more dynamic. I mean, obviously, Christian Kirk was a great pickup last year for them. So, yeah, I think Calvin Ridley, gives them an actual true number one, where Christian Kirk can actually be a number 2. And I think he'll, he's definitely probably going to have that edge this year. So he's out to prove something in terms of Calvin Ridley. So I'm going to actually he'll probably be over 1,300 yards.
I agree with you on that. I think he will be. I think he will become their number 1. Moving on, just real quick, what do you think of their draft? I know they took Antonio Johnson, the cornerback out of Texas A&M, who you're really high on.
I love that guy, man. Big nickel. I think he'll. Yeah.
As their draft as a whole, just real quick, just looking at it just on paper, what's your thoughts?
Looking at their draft as a whole, I mean, I like Tank Bigsby. I mean, obviously, Anton Harrison was probably one of the better pass blocking tackles in the draft. So they did a good one getting him. I like Tank Bigsby. Really like that kid Ventrell Miller from Florida. I think he's got some edge rushing capabilities as well. Antonio Johnson's a big nickel. Parker Washington's a great find here in the 6th round. I think for what they got a lot of they filled a lot of holes. They brought in a lot of young guys to kind of compete with some of the guys they already had on the roster. I'm actually gonna give this draft a solid B plus, maybe just a solid B, because there's not really a prospect on here that sticks out. I
agree with you on that.
But I like the fact that they brought a bunch of people in. They had all those draft picks. They're gonna, when you have an overhaul like that, David, it's to push the guys that are already there, and you got some spots that are open that maybe some of those young guys can transform.
Yep. Moving on, let's talk back to free agency. Obviously, notable additions: Brandon McManus, Josh Wells, DeAndre Jones-Johnson. Notable departures: Arden Key, Juwan Taylor, Shaquille Griffin, who went to the Houston Texans. Marvin Jones, who I think is still a free agent. Dan Arnold, who also I think is still a free agent at the tight end position. I don't know that outside of Juwan Taylor, I'm not so sure that any of these guys are such big losses that they're going to be detrimental to the team. Shaquille Griffin was solid when they signed him. He wasn't really all that good for them. He goes to Houston. I mean, I'm not losing any sleep over anybody they lost outside of maybe Juwan Taylor, given the Cam Robinson suspension.
Yeah, I'm not. Honestly, I think getting Brandon McManus was huge.
I agree with you, man. I agree with you. I don't even remember who the tight end was last.
Josh Booth. Let's go. I honestly, DeAndre Johnson's, is running back depth. He'd probably be their RB3, RB4. With them getting Bigsby, with them having what's his name, ETN.
Yeah, and they also signed JaMychal Hasty, who was in San Francisco, I think, last season, or No, I don't remember where he was last
Yeah,
year.
JaMychal Hasty is another running back. He's another running back. So, anyways, yeah. Honestly, they're not going to miss. I mean, Arden Key's a guy that they're going to miss 4.5 sacks from him.
Yeah, I mean
He's
he's bounced around the league a little bit. He's bounced around the league a little bit.
Yeah, so the departures aren't really going to hurt him. But I do think, and Brandon McManus is going to help them tremendously. I do think that.
Yep, I think so too. So I don't remember who the kicker was last season, but I mean this is kind of like the free agency class. I don't really care all that much about who they lost outside of Juwan Taylor, and I'm very excited about Josh Wells and Brandon McManus. I think those are pretty solid ads. Depth of the offensive line and the kicker.
Absolutely. I mean, we've seen in this league how important the kicker is, how important special teams is. So
yeah, I mean, especially as a Packers.
It literally is the difference between winning a title and not winning a title. Special teams
or getting beat at home by the San Francisco 49ers.
Or the Seattle Seahawks. Okay.
Yeah. So let's go into the schedule. Let's go. Let's start. Let's talk about their schedule. They start the season off. They go to the house that Peyton Manning built, and they take on the Indianapolis Colts. Do they get out of there with a victory against the Indianapolis Colts?
They sweep that whole division. So
I agree with you. I think, I do think they do sweep their entire division. I think that where the problem starts is you get the rematch from the divisional round there. Kansas City Chiefs going into Kansas City Chiefs coming into Jacksonville, to Duval County, taking on the Jaguars. Unfortunately, I do not think they start 2-0. I think that they fall to the Kansas City Chiefs and they start the season at 1-1.
Yeah, 1-1. It's a tough one. I didn't even share the show. It's a tough one. It's a tough one for them to play the champs, at home. But I mean, at least that's the only thing that they got for them is they're at home. So, but I do believe they do start 1-1.
And then the next two games are technically at home. The Houston Texans come to Duval County, and then technically they have a home game, which is in London against the Atlanta Falcons. I will say that they think they probably win both of those two games. I think they easily beat Houston, and I think they go to London and face the Atlanta Falcons, even though I do think Atlanta has the recipe to give them trouble based on the fact that Atlanta's going to run the ball down their throats constantly. But I think Atlanta's going to lose that game. I got them at 3-1.
Yeah, so I got them at 3-1. I think they beat Atlanta, they beat Houston, they beat Indy. Wow, these back-to-back games in London?
Yeah.
Jesus.
I like
that they do that. I actually like that they do that. So it's not different teams. So like the team that's there doesn't have to
travel.
Yeah, all kinds of crazy.
So, and then the next week they go, technically the game is in London, but it's technically a home game for the Buffalo Bills. But I'm not necessarily sure I care where the game is. I don't think they can beat Buffalo.
No.
I think, especially I think the London crowd's going to be super behind Buffalo. So I think they fall to 3-2.
Yes. So I do think they become 3-2 as well. They split their London series here with Atlanta and Buffalo.
I agree with you on that. So, then they got 3 games before their bye week. Indianapolis comes to town, and then they go to the Bayou, and then they go to the Steel City in back-to-back weeks to play the Saints and the Steelers. How do you think they shake out in those 3 games?
So they beat the Colts. It's going to be a tough one going to New Orleans, but I think they can beat New Orleans. And, I want to say they could beat Pittsburgh too. I'm actually gonna say that they win all 3 of those games. Actually, I'm not too high on Pittsburgh. I'm not too high on Pittsburgh as a lot of people are this year.
I'm actually going to disagree with you. I like what Pittsburgh did in the draft. I think Kenny Pickett takes another step, and George Pickens takes another step forward, along with that offense and Deontay Johnson. I'm actually going to have the Jaguars actually lose 2 of those 3 games. I think they beat the Colts, and I think they lose to New Orleans, and I think they lose to Pittsburgh. I have them at 4-4 before their bye week.
I got them at 6-2 so far.
So, and then after their bye week, they get the treat of San Francisco 49ers coming into town. I have no idea who the quarterback's going to be. Let's assume it's going to be Brock Purdy at this point. But I think that's a game they still lose. They fall to 4-5 coming out of their bye with San Francisco coming to town.
San Fran's coming into town. That defense is still going to be top notch. I got them losing that game. They're 6-3 in my book so far.
And then after that, they got two rivals in the division back-to-back weeks. They go the Tennessee Titans come to town, and then they go to Houston. I think they get back onto their winning ways. I think they beat Tennessee, and I think they beat Houston. I got them going up to 6-5 at that point.
Yeah. So Tennessee, I got them beating I got them sweeping the division. So I got them beating Tennessee, beating Houston on the road as well. So right now, I got them at 8-3 right now so far, and pretty much they're about to wrap this division up pretty soon, probably with their next couple, maybe next few weeks here.
And then after that, they go up against an AFC opponent, Cincinnati Bengals, a team they expect to see in the playoffs at some point. This game is in Duval County. Cincinnati Bengals going up against the Jacksonville Jaguars. What do you got winning this game?
This stretches the AFC North gauntlet right here, man.
It's tough for sure.
Oh, it's a tough one. This is a tough one. I only have them beating Cleveland. I got them losing to Cincinnati at home. I got them beating Cleveland on the road. I got them losing to Baltimore. So they're 9-5 right now in my book.
I only sort of disagree with you. I think they do go out and they beat Cleveland in Cleveland, but I actually think they beat Cincinnati in Duval County. And then I think they lose to the Baltimore Ravens. So I got them going at 8-6 going into the finals 3 games of their season. And I think that they win the last 3 games of their season fairly easily. I think they go into Tampa, into Raymond James Stadium, and they deal with the Pirates out there and take care of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They beat the Carolina Panthers, and then they go to Nissan Stadium into Nashville and beat the Tennessee Titans, and they finish the season 11-6 and win this division.
And so I think TJ had him at 11-6 as well, or 12-5. I got him at 12-5, just a hair over you. So that's pretty much the ceiling. I think win the AFC. I think this team can win over 10 games, and I think you win a playoff game. And if you make it to the AFC Championship game, you're ahead of schedule. And definitely, if you make it to the Super Bowl, you're. But
I also think that there's a scenario where, in my predictions, I think they could beat the Saints, and I think they could beat the Pittsburgh Steelers, and I think
those are going to be close games.
Those are going to be close games. I think there are a lot of games. We look at their schedule, like those are going to be close games. I think there's a scenario where they do beat Buffalo, in London, given the fact that Buffalo's going to be traveling back over, and Jacksonville will already be there, relaxing, kicking their feet up, waiting for them to get there. But I have Jacksonville 11-6.
Chips.
Yeah, 11-6, comfortably winning the AFC South. Probably not like the number 1 seed in the AFC, but they for sure should be a formidable opponent when it comes to the playoffs in the AFC.
We're covering every team in the NFL. Barbara. If you don't watch the show often, we cover all sports. Mostly NFL and NBA, but mostly football and basketball in the college and pro level. So
Barbara, we covered all 4 teams in the AFC South. We covered the Tennessee Titans, Jacksonville Jaguars, Houston Texans, Indianapolis Colts. We did past episodes about each of those individual teams. You can find all of those videos on Prime Sports World Facebook page and our YouTube and on our Twitch. They're also on all of our streaming platforms. But thank you very much for checking us out.
Yes, ma'am.
And we do have our own fan pages. But the AFC South, this is what it's about. I mean, talking about the Jacksonville Jaguars. Thank you very much for checking us out. We got the Jaguars 11-6 and Izzy 12-5. Thank you very much for checking us out,
baby.
The NBA draft 12 minutes away. Look for that content. NBA draft. Duval, yeah.
Duval County.
NFL draft, NBA draft winners and losers tomorrow. You don't want to miss that content. I'm David Huffman. Right there is Israel Rivera. Please like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. And Izzy, what do we do here at the Prime, my friend?
We bring the heat, ladies and gentlemen. I was going to throw my glass cup. I don't have my pen. We bring the heat.
Don't throw the glass,
baby.
I'll see you tomorrow, man. You have a good night.
Peace out.
Hey, go Victor Wembanyama, baby. Let's go.
Victor. And I think I told you Scoot Henderson's going too. Brandon Miller 3. There you go. Heard it from here first.
Let's see. We'll talk about it tomorrow.